Good morning. Barb Veeder with HealthNet Federal Services. There's a lot of changes. So what I've got your regular TRICARE brief for those individuals that are getting ready to retire, the normal stuff. But I've kind of put in with it the changes that are coming up too, because that's going to affect you as retirees. One of the biggest changes right now is the contract. The TRICARE contracts are bid out every 5 to 6 years. This one, the TRICARE contract, which is now administered through HealthNet Federal Services, was bid out in 2016 and awarded in 2016, with the begin date being January 1st of 2018. And right now, as you can see, you've got 3 regions. You've got a United Healthcare in the west, you got HealthNet Federal Services in the north, and Humana Military in the south. What happened is the government took the country, split it right in half. There's only going to be 2 regions, 2 contractors. HealthNet Federal Services is going in the west. Humana Military is coming up and taking over the East Coast. Now that's important because for those of you that are AGR, your contractor is changing. Now, if you're in TRICARE Prime or Standard or Prime Remote right now, January 1st, that'll all cross over automatically. But you need to be aware it's happening, because you never should assume that everything's going to work the way it should. So if you're familiar with the MilConnect website, that's a great website. Go in there after the 1st of January. Make sure your families are still showing TRICARE Prime Remote or TRICARE Prime, that you're still in the system, everything's okay. Check your dental, make sure your dental's good, just to double check and make sure everything transitioned over. So that's huge. For those of you that are on the traditional side, this will only come into play if you're getting ready to retire, which is what we're talking about today, or you go on orders next year. DEERS, probably the most important part of this program. You've got to make sure DEERS is kept up to date. Whether you move, whether you get married, whether you have a newborn, whether your child turns 10 and needs an ID card, or you're retiring. That's important, because once you retire and you turn 60, unless you're AGR, you need to go in and get that ID card updated, and it needs to show up in DEERS. Everything a contractor does is based on what the military put in the DEERS system. Your status and care that you get if you go on orders is based on DEERS. So if you have orders that are more than 30 days and DEERS doesn't get updated, we can't cover your family. We can't cover you. So it's important. Make sure demographic changes, email, phone numbers, that kind of thing. You can go right into MilConnect and update that yourself. You don't need to go to a DEERS support office to do that. As far as your benefit when you retire, if you're a retired reserve member or National Guard and you're under 60 and you're traditional, you're not going to get your TRICARE benefit until age 60. Even if you've got enough active duty time where you can get your retired pay early, you are still not going to get your medical benefit until age 60. So that's really important. From 60 to 65 or 64, so 60 to 65, you have the normal TRICARE benefit. You can enroll in TRICARE Prime to Martins Point if you live in this area. You can stay with TRICARE Standard, which is going to change. We'll talk about that. But then at age 65, as long as you pick up Medicare Part A and B, then you have TRICARE For Life, which right now is a phenomenal benefit. It's great. The only out-of-pocket you have with TRICARE For Life is a small copay for pharmacy. So as you can see, under 60, you're eligible for TRICARE Retired Reserve, and we're going to talk about that. At age 60, then you get the normal benefit, and then 65 TRICARE For Life. When you retire, that goes away. You cannot continue TRICARE Reserve Select, and you can't take advantage of those wonderful premiums anymore. TRICARE Retired Reserve is that gray area benefit that covers you between the time you retire from the Guard or Reserve till you hit 60. But it's kind of expensive. The government's picking up about 72% of the TRICARE Reserve Select or TRS benefit, which keeps those premiums pretty low. But there's no government buy-in on the TRICARE Retired Reserve or TRR. And you know that you can't get the TRS because you're a civilian technician. Well, you can't get the TRICARE Retired Reserve either. But to be honest with you, what you're looking at as far as premiums for TRR, TRICARE Retired Reserve, is $400 and some odd for single and over $1,000 a month for family. So that's a lot of money. So if you currently have other health insurance through an employer or possibly the FEHBP, you're going to have to stick with that until you hit 60. And then you can pick up the normal TRICARE benefit, which you do not pay a premium or enrollment fee right now for. So if you did want to purchase it, there is a website. You have to go in through the beneficiary web enrollment. You have to actually pull up the form online. You have to fill it in online, just like with the TRICARE Reserve Select benefit. And then you have to print out the form, sign it, and then mail or fax it in, just like TRS. It's all done the same way. You have to have 2 months premium up front, and you set up an electronic funds transfer. That's all part of the TRR, but be prepared for those premiums. If you're enrolling a family under TRICARE Retired Reserve, you're looking at $2,000 up front to get that started. And it should be effective as of the date you retire. So if you have other health insurance and that's more expensive, then you could actually, whatever day you retire is when that would kick in. Okay, next slide. The benefit you get under TRICARE Reserve Select or TRICARE Retired Reserve is called the TRICARE Standard benefit. And it's very similar to a PPO. You have freedom of choice. You can use any doctor you want. There's no requirement for referrals or authorizations, but you have a deductible and a cost share with this benefit. Well, the government decided to do away with TRICARE Standard and Extra. Extra is the benefit where you get a discounted cost share if you use network doctors. So Standard and Extra, as of January 1st, is going away. They're going to call it TRICARE Select. Not to be confused with TRICARE Reserve Select, totally separate program. But the TRICARE Reserve Select does follow the same guidelines as the TRICARE Select as far as the benefit. Your benefit under TRICARE Select is going to be absolutely the same benefit that you're using now. As far as cost shares, you have a 20% cost share. You have a deductible based on rank, E4s and below, 50 a person, 100 a family, E5s and above, 150 a person, 300 a family. That deductible right now has to be met on a fiscal year. As of January 1st, it's changing to calendar year. So for those of you that are using TRICARE Reserve Select right now, perhaps you've noticed that you haven't had to meet a new deductible. That's because they extended the end time for your deductible to December. And then January 1st, you'll start over. So, and then you're not going to hear TRICARE Standard anymore. It's going to be TRICARE Select. So if you've got a Guard or Reserve family and they go on orders, they're going to have TRICARE Select, not TRICARE Standard. And you're going to see that on the beneficiary web enrollment. So just as an FYI on that. So the other thing that's changing more so for retirees than for active duty family members is you're going to see some costs increase under TRICARE Select and TRICARE Prime. So if your initial enlistment was before January 1st, you'd fall into Group A. If your initial enlistment would be after January 1st, you fall into Group B. So the one thing that the government did say that TRICARE Reserve Select benefits would fall under Plan B. So TRICARE Reserve Select, Continued Healthcare Benefit Program, those are all going to be Group B cost shares. So as you can see, for active duty family members, there really isn't any change for TRICARE Select or TRICARE Prime. Your catastrophic cap is still the same. You still have, for TRICARE Select, you don't have a point of service because it's not a managed care option. You can go any doctor you want, but the point of service for TRICARE Prime, you still have that 50% cost share and a $300 deductible. So your costs for active duty families, like those would be families going on and off of orders, those of you that are still either AGR or possibly going on orders, that's what you're looking at. The next slide talks about retirees, though. That's where you're going to see the changes. So TRICARE Select, Group A and B, you're looking at a difference in the annual enrollment. So for TRICARE Select, again, don't confuse this with TRICARE Reserve Select. This is totally separate. This is the Select for retirees. So Group A, there's no enrollment fee. Group B is going to have an enrollment fee for TRICARE Select, which used to be TRICARE Standard. That's a big change. So for those of you that are getting ready to retire, you need to be aware that your benefit is now going to have an enrollment fee. So you need to watch that, yeah, because the Guard and Reserve, if they're traditional, don't have their benefit till age 60. Now the AGR that are getting ready to retire, they're going to fall into the Group A. Your catastrophic cap is still the same. Your deductible, your cost share is still the same. But the Group B, and those would be the new people coming into the military, there's going to be some definite changes. So when they get ready to retire, those costs are going to increase. Now Prime, and keep in mind that as a retiree, you do pay an enrollment fee for Prime. Right now it's $282, I believe, for single a year, and $565 and some odd cents for family coverage. January 1st, that's going to go up to the $278 and the $289 and $578 a year. Still, when you're looking at that, that's $578 a year for family coverage. That's still great coverage. So you're still looking at a good benefit, but if it's Group B, that enrollment fee increases significantly. So those of you that are sitting right here right now, you're not going to have to worry about Group B because you came into the military before January 1st. So that the other one is really more for the new folks coming in. Question was, it's the Group A or B is not based on when you retire, it's based on when you came into the military. So if your initial enlistment was before 2018, then you're going to fall into Group A. Group B is for those folks coming into the military. Their medical benefit is going to change. So for the HERs and the Guard and Reserve retirees, traditional folks, you're going to fall under the Group A. Young adult is out there. TRICARE Young Adult is the benefit that TRICARE has for our children, dependent children, that turn 21 and are not a full-time student, or turn 23 and have graduated. TRICARE will cover them until age 26, but there is a fee they will charge. It's $208, I believe, for TRICARE Select, and it's $316 for TRICARE Prime. So it's not inexpensive, but that's TRICARE's answer, the government's answer to the NDAA. So you do have that benefit. And what's unusual about the TRICARE Young Adult program, normally a dependent child needs an ID card to be able to enroll in a program. Not so with the TRICARE Young Adult. They have to actually enroll first, and then once that information goes into the system, then go to a DARE support office and get their ID card after that. So it's kind of quirky in that respect. So when you turn 60, You don't pay to enroll in TRICARE unless you're going to enroll in Prime. You have the normal TRICARE benefit. So if you've got other health insurance and you turn 60 and you're going to continue to use that other health insurance, once you get your military ID card updated for yourself and for any eligible family members, automatically you would get TRICARE Select. Now there is some discrepancies in that. We're seeing that automatically you're going to be enrolled if you're in a remote area to TRICARE Select, or if you're in a Prime service area, you're going to be enrolled in TRICARE Prime. Other things, other comments that we've seen in writing is that you have to do it. You have to go in. So if you change, if you retire, you turn 60, you retire, then the other side of that coin is you have to go into MilConnect and you have to enroll to TRICARE Select if that's what you want, or TRICARE Prime if that's what you want. So we're still trying to get clarification on that. So I'm going to give you some websites before I get through today, and you will see that. It's kind of a miscommunication. We're trying to get some additional information from the government on how that's supposed to work. So keep in mind that this is all very new. Once you do retire, once you do turn 60, double check. Go into the websites that I give you. Make sure that you're doing what needs to be done to make sure your family has coverage. The way the government's got it worked now, if let's say one of your AGRs have a child, if they don't enroll that child within 90 days of that date of birth, it's not going to keep you in TRICARE Standard or Select. You're not going to have any coverage at all for that child. So the huge changes there. You've got to make sure that your family is showing enrolled in something. And as I mentioned earlier, for those of you that are AGR or possibly on orders right now, whatever you're showing in the DEARS system will automatically transition to Humana Military on 1 January. But double check. For those of you that are retiring, and I don't know how old you are when you retire, but if you're 60, make sure you get your ID card. Make sure you're showing enrolled in something. Even if you're keeping that other health insurance and you say, well, you know, I'm not really too concerned about it. I got my Blue Cross or whatever. But keep in mind that this is your benefit. You don't pay for TRICARE Select right now. So why not make use of it? It'll help you with co-pays, not only for medical, but for pharmacy. So keep that in mind. You might as well take advantage of the benefit. Prime service areas are bases, 40 air mile radius around a base, or a base realignment enclosure. In New York, we've got Plattsburgh, we got Griffiths. Those are the two BRAC sites. There's prime service areas there. Fort Drum, prime service area. West Point, prime service area. But when you start getting out into Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Canandaigua, that's a remote area. And HealthNet or Humana Military cannot offer TRICARE Prime Remote to a retiree. So this is where Martin's Point for all of you is a huge benefit, huge, because now you can utilize that $565 a year for a managed care benefit. You can't beat it. So you're not automatically going to be enrolled in TRICARE Prime when you retire. You have got to make a decision whether you go with Martin's Point or if you go with TRICARE Select. If you live next to Fort Drum, it's a win-win. So when you get ready to retire, you get your military ID card. You've got to decide, do I want to do Prime or do I want to do Select? You have the option because you're in a Prime service area. Not only that, because you have an MTF, you can fill your scripts on base and you pay nothing out of pocket. And if you wanted to have some things done, a lot of military treatment facilities or MTFs will do lab work for you and send it out to the referring provider. Sometimes optometry, you know, you can get in for glasses where you wouldn't have been able to get glasses as a retiree downtown. So there are some benefits to being near an MTF. You don't necessarily have to use them for your medical benefit, or You can enroll to Fort Drum, but you don't have to. You have that luxury of that choice. So, and keep in mind, TRICARE Prime is a managed care option. So you have to enroll, you have to select a network provider, you have to use the doctor's name when you do the enrollment. Or if you want to enroll to a VA, you can just put Syracuse VA on the web, or Rochester or Buffalo VA. You can certainly do that too. My only concern is if you have any kind of service-connected issue, keep them separate from TRICARE. You know, you shouldn't be paying anything out of pocket for TRICARE or for something at the VA if it's service-connected. So you want to keep those separated. The other thing is, and this isn't really going to affect any of you because you're not retiring. There isn't anybody that's retiring before the end of the year, right? Oh, really? Okay. If you're going to enroll in TRICARE Prime, please understand that the enrollment is going to go by a calendar year starting January 1st. And right now, they're prorating enrollment fees for TRICARE Prime for retirees from October through December because of that fiscal year issue. But everything the government is going to be doing is going to be based on a calendar year. That fiscal year is going to go away. There's nothing out there that's going to be based fiscal year. So keep that in mind. And the enrollment fee for TRICARE Prime normally goes by the 20th of the month rule right now. As of 1 January, it's not going to do that. There's a ton of changes as far as enrollment. But if you're retiring before the end of the year and you want to select, I shouldn't say that word, and you want to go with either TRICARE Select or TRICARE Prime, right now, the only thing you have to enroll in is TRICARE Prime. If you retire in December and you show TRICARE Standard, that's going to transition on 1 January. Okay, you don't have to do anything. But for those of you that might be that will want to enroll in TRICARE Prime, you've got to make sure, next slide please. You've got to make sure you do it by the 20th of November, which is Monday. So, because there's an enrollment freeze. Now, having said that, for those of you that are retiring before the end of the year, you can still call the 800 number, you can still mail in an enrollment form, and they will hold it. They won't process it, but they will hold it. And then after the 1st of January, when the systems have transitioned over, Humana will pull all those enrollments and process them. And they will process them based on the day it was received. So if you sent the enrollment in, you're retiring 31 December and you want to enroll in TRICARE Prime to Martin's Point, you can still do that enrollment. And then Martin's Point will process that enrollment based on the day it was received. So you would be covered under TRICARE Prime as a retiree on 1 January. But don't let this freeze frustrate you. Just do the enrollment form. Call Martin's Point. They will take care of all of that. They just can't process it until after the freeze is over with. The question was, AGRs don't have to do a thing. As long as you don't want to make any primary care changes, as long as everything is the way you want it right now, then 1 January everybody will transition over to either Prime Remote, or TRICARE Select if you have standard. So you don't have to do anything. But what am I saying to you on 1 January or sometime in January? What do you need to do though? Don't assume that transition. Go into MilConnect. Make sure the family's still good. Everybody's enrolled where they should be. That's important. So that just goes on to tell you that they're still going to hold those enrollments. They're still going to process them after the freeze. So if you made a primary care change in your AGR right now, that primary care change will happen, but it won't be done until the end of December, beginning of January. So DEERS, I can't even begin to tell you how important DEERS is. Whether you're AGR or traditional or retired, You've got to make sure DEERS is current, especially with all these changes coming up. Where we see a lot of issues is if a traditional member goes on orders, comes off those orders, and is supposed to have the additional 6 months of coverage beyond when those orders end. If they are entered into DEERS, you can't get that additional 6 months. So DEERS is so important. What type of care you have is based on what's in the DEERS system. So it's really important to make sure that's taken care of. I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware, for those of you that may be thinking about enrolling in TRICARE Prime or Prime Remote for AGRs, the point of service option is out there for the family members. If they don't get an authorization for specialty care, and either whether it's network or non-network, that claim is not going to pay. So active duty family members right now have zero copay under TRICARE Prime Remote. But if you don't get that authorization, you go from zero copay to a $300 deductible and a 50% cost share. So important. The other thing, after January 1st, there's some benefits, and it looks like the government is going to lighten up as far as what requires authorizations and what doesn't, which is going to affect the AGRs right now. And it could affect the retirees that are going to enroll in TRICARE Prime through Martin's Point. Martin's Point has different requirements than we do, and I'll talk about that as we get to their slide. But the other thing, for the AGRs, were you aware there's an urgent care pilot program right now? The urgent care pilot program allows family members to, and TRICARE Prime Remote Active Duty, to go to an urgent care clinic twice within a year. It'll end up being calendar year after the 1st of January. So the family member can go non-network, network. Doesn't matter where they go, they don't have to have authorization. So it's 2 visits per year per family member. And it looks like after the 1st of January that may even get better as far as referrals and auths for specialty care. So kind of get out in those websites, look at the changes that are coming up, because the benefit supposedly is supposed to get better as far as what's covered and what's not. The question was, what do you do with a college-age student? Do you leave them in TRICARE Prime Remote? The problem you're running into, if they're enrolled TRICARE Prime Remote and then you move them somewhere else, that Prime Remote designation is only if they're residing with you. Some families play a dangerous game. They keep the child enrolled. If urgent care comes up, now you got those 2 freebies. They just make sure they go, and whatever preventive stuff, they make sure they're done when the child comes back home. What you really should do is disenroll the child, have the child go TRICARE Select. That way they have the freedom to go to any doctor wherever they happen to be going to college. And that also depends, where is the college? Is it near a prime service area or is it remote? So those are different things you have to look at. So, Uniform Services Family Health Plan, that is Martin's Point. As you can see, the gray areas, that's the only places you've got USFHPs. You've got Johns Hopkins and down in the Maryland, Virginia area. You've got Martin's Point, which starts at Maine and goes down through Pennsylvania. All of New York is now developed. You've got St. Vincent, which is in the city. You've got Christus Health, which I believe is in Texas, and I can't remember the Washington one, but these, when you go into this website, you're going to go in usfhp.org, and when you scroll down the very bottom of the page, it lists all their subsidiaries, including Martin's Point. So you click on Martin's Point, that'll take you to the Martin's Point website. And from there you can do provider searches to see if the providers that you want, whether the providers you're currently using or you want to use, are in their network. And that's where TRICARE Prime, you have to make sure of the providers you're using. So if your family is set up with a certain primary care or certain specialists, you want to make sure before you make this switch to Martin's Point when you retire that that's what you want to do, because if those doctors that they're currently using are not in the network for Martin's Point, now you got to make a decision. Do I switch my doctors, or do I just stay with TRICARE Select and use the providers I've always used over the years? So the other part of that is too, if you've got that other health insurance, do you really want to pay another enrollment fee to enroll in TRICARE Prime as a retiree? That's something else you need to kind of weigh to see what's most important to you. Whether or not you enroll in a managed care option, which is TRICARE Prime, or you go with TRICARE Select, which is like a PPO, it's a personal decision. It's based on what kind of medical care you need when you retire, what you're looking for, your specialty care, you know, all of that plays into it. So if you're thinking about doing that, absolutely consider all your different options. The thing with Martin's Point, the representative in this area is Ralph Sosnowski. And if you come to the table, I do have his contact information, and I can give you that. He provides seminars throughout the area. I'm not sure how often, but Martin's Point TRICARE Prime is the same as any TRICARE Prime across the country. You know, we're all a little bit different as far as networks and that type of thing, but the benefit you're getting is exactly the same. The enrollment fees are going to be exactly the same. The co-pays are going to be exactly the same. And for those of you like AGR, for instance, this is where you're going to see a big change. Not only are you paying an enrollment fee when you retire, but now you're going to be having co-pays. Right now, the co-pays are $12. After the 1st of January, they're going to be higher co-pays. I believe it's $20 for primary care, $30 for specialty care. So kind of look for that too as you're getting ready to retire, and weigh that against what you're paying for your other health insurance, or whether it's something you want to continue with. But benefit-wise, you know, a lot of people will come up to me and say, well, I don't know about this Martin's Point thing. What is this? And it's just another company that has a contract with the federal government, but they have a very different contract than we have. We offer both TRICARE Select, TRICARE Prime. We deal with active duty. We deal with military treatment facilities. Our contract is set up like that. Their contract is capitated, meaning they're reimbursed based on the number of enrollees. So they can sometimes build a more robust network because they can offer doctors a little more than what we can. So when you're looking at Martin's Point, like I said, look at the network, and also set up just go to one of his seminars, because they can offer enhancements that we can't. Things like eyeglasses, not a covered benefit. They can't pay for eyeglasses any more than we can, but they've set up a system so if you're enrolled to Martin's Point and you use a certain optometrist that sells glasses, you can get a discount on those glasses simply by virtue of being enrolled to Martin's Point. So there's some real advantages to going with Martin's Point, not to mention the fact that it's the only game in town for Prime. If you want TRICARE Prime, you've got to go with Martin's Point, unless you live near a military base or a BRAC site. Any questions on that? Yes. Oh, if you go down to North Carolina for 2-3 weeks, or even a month, they're going to give you an out-of-area urgent care approval. But if you're going to be a snowbird and you're going down there 3 to 6 months, you've got to disenroll from Martin's Point and either go TRICARE Select or enroll in Prime if you're near like Eglin or McDill. And keep in mind, after 1 January, it's going to be based on a calendar year, and the only time they'll do 2018, they're being very liberal with enrollments and disenrollments and primary care changes. January of 2019, you can only do it in open season unless there's a qualifying life event. And for you, that would be moving. You're moving out of area, so that's considered a qualifying life event. So if you go down in, I don't know, January, well then yeah, we'll go ahead and allow that. But it's going to be October to November. For those of you that have civilian employer insurance, That's basically what you do now anyway. You have open season, and that's how you work your insurance. Well, TRICARE is going the same way. The families can, the active duty cannot. So that's important. The active duty have to stay with Health Net or Humana, but family members can switch. And it's a wash. If you do it before the end of December, the day they receive the enrollment is the day you're actually enrolled to Martin's Point as a family member. We both use the same exact enrollment forms. We both use the beneficiary web enrollment. But remember, after the 20th of November, that freeze starts, and everything's going to be held until the end of December. So, but you can still, if you do the enrollment, let's say before the 20th of December, and you send it in, you can still use that Martin's Point doctor, get the care you need when the enrollment goes through. If the claim processes and denies, you can always get it reprocessed and submitted the way it should be. So you have that option as well. TRICARE for Life is the benefit that hits when you're 65. There are some people under 65 that are eligible for TRICARE for Life. That would be for maybe a spouse has a disability, as long as she or he has Medicare Part A and B, then they can have TRICARE for Life before 65 for a disability. But most of the time, you're going to be 65. And what happens if you're enrolled to TRICARE Prime or you're using TRICARE Select, that all goes away. Because once you picked up Medicare Part A and B, that automatically enrolls you in TRICARE for Life. And the way it works is Medicare becomes your primary, TRICARE for Life is your secondary. When the doctor submits it to Medicare, Medicare sends it to TRICARE for Life. There's no out-of-pocket, absolutely none. The only co-pays a TRICARE for Life beneficiary would have would be for pharmacy co-pays. So right now it's a phenomenal benefit. I've had retirees come up to me and say they've had $500,000 in medical bills for cardiac surgery or something. They paid absolutely nothing. Now, a lot of people, some of you have employer-based health plans or FEHBP, you know, if you want to keep that when you turn 65, it becomes a little more convoluted simply because there's no automatic transferring there. The provider bills Medicare, then they got to turn around and bill Blue Cross or whatever it is, and then if there's anything left, they have to bill TRICARE for Life. So it gets a little more involved when you got the other health insurance. But right now, this is a great benefit. And again, you got to go to DEERS when you turn 65 and get that ID card updated. Even the retirees now, because once you retire, if you look at the back of your ID card, unless they've changed this, and I don't know if they have, your eligibility for civilian care ends on your birthday when you turn 65. So you've got to go back in with your Medicare card, make sure that they show Part A and B, and that's important. If you don't pick up Part B, you can't use TRICARE once you hit 65. So you have to have Part B. So we kind of touched on TRICARE and other health insurance. If you decide to keep your other health insurance and you turn 60 and you've got TRICARE, please understand that other health insurance is always primary, always. Birthday rules, state regulations, none of that comes into play. That Blue Cross, CDPHP, and independent health, whatever you've got, is going to be primary. And that's the way it has to work. And don't assume because you have TRICARE as the secondary that you don't have to follow your other health insurance rules. You still do. I had an active duty family member. She had TRICARE. She didn't want to use the doctor her Blue Cross told her to use, so she used a different doctor because she thought TRICARE would come in as a secondary. As soon as we got the explanation of benefits saying that she didn't follow her guidelines, TRICARE didn't pay either. So you've got to make sure, treat it as though you don't have TRICARE as the secondary. Follow those guidelines. It's really, really important. And keep in mind, you can do it for pharmacy too. You go into the pharmacy, you show your military ID card, they automatically coordinate benefits right off the bat. I can't remember the last time I had a copay for any prescriptions, even with the antibiotics that I'm on. So, you know, you've got, and when you go to a doctor, just show your military ID card. And every time you present at a doctor's office, they always ask you any changes in your health care coverage, any differences, you know. So when you do become eligible for TRICARE, make sure they know. And they'll want your military ID card. They are allowed by regulation to copy that military ID card. And your ID cards now don't have your socials on them anyway. And the providers can use that to bill TRICARE, the DOD ID number. Pharmacy benefit is a good benefit as well. The only pharmacy in this area that is not in the network is CVS and Target, because I believe the CVS pharmacies are in Target. But your Rite Aid, your Walmart, your Walgreens, Wegmans, Hannaford, Price Chopper, Kinney, they're all network, but do not use CVS. And your retail pharmacy, you've got $10 for generic, $24 for name brand. The mail order is a great benefit. You're looking at 0 copay for 90 days of generic and $20 for 90 days of name brand. AGRs don't pay, the member doesn't pay anything for scripts. Family member has to pay those copays. So it's really a good benefit. And if you happen to be near a military base, most military treatment facilities will fill civilian scripts. But there's always the chance that they may not carry your medication in their formulary. Some MTFs will order it, some may not. So you just have to double check. But then when you fill it at an MTF, you pay nothing out of pocket for that. And if you get a prescription and it's a maintenance medication, something you're going to have to take month after month, and the doctor sends it to the pharmacy, say in error, instead of sending it to Express Scripts, you could just call Express Scripts. They'll pull that medication and turn it into a mail order for you. They will work with you on doing that. And most times the doctor wants you to start with something right away and not have to wait for mail time to get a script out. So they're really very good to work with. I've not had any problems with Express Scripts. TRICARE Retiree Dental is administered right now by Delta Dental. Now, the one thing that's happening with dental, as of January of 2019, Delta Dental is going away. The government has decided to give retirees, they call it, and those of you that are in FEHBP, FedVIP. Does that ring any bells to anybody? It's a federal vision and dental plan. So that's coming up in January 2019. That's not going to affect the AGRs. You're still going to have United Concordia for the remote active duty and the family member dental. This is strictly retiree dental. So when you, and the thing about the retiree dental, you don't have to be 60 to get it. You can retire tomorrow and be eligible for the retiree dental. My husband and I have it. It runs us, just to give you an idea, about $70 a month for the two of us. So, and they're very comparable as far as what they will pay for. You're still getting the 80-20 split for fillings, 2 checkups a year, 100% coverage. That includes your cleanings, your x-rays. And then they do pick up on implants, 50%, root canals, crowns. They will do braces, and they do bridges and all of that. So I have a brochure on my table if you want to look at it. But you know, if you're retiring at the end of the year and you don't have dental coverage, because if you do have United Concordia, as soon as you retire, that goes away. You can't keep that. So you either go with Delta Dental or an employer-based plan or something. So kind of keep that. But watch for the news coming up as far as this FedVip. I don't have anything that talks about cost or anything. I just know. And I'm really watching it because we have it, so I'm kind of curious. Vision is a plus, I think. Right now, I use my employer-based health plan, so I do get some return on glasses, but TRICARE doesn't cover glasses. So you might see some increased benefit for retirees then. Medical is medical, dental is totally separate. And Delta Dental is a national program. So it's wherever you go, if you move somewhere else or go on vacation, you need dental care, you just go on their website and look and see which dentists are, participating and go from there. So yeah, absolutely separate. So to summarize, what do you need to do? DEERS, 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 DEERS. Gotta make sure DEERS is up to date and current. And you have a main number there, as well as a fax, but signing up for e-correspondence will keep you updated on changes. The other one is tricare.mil/changes. When you go into that website, that'll list all of the changes that are coming up, every single change. And you can also sign up for emails through that too. And I would advise, even for those of you that aren't retiring in a couple years, make sure you sign up for these emails, because those are emails that are going to give you information about all the changes that are happening in your medical program. Whether you use it or not, I would hope you would use it in one capacity or the other, but this is your benefit, and you need to be aware of how it's being affected by legislation and all of that. So you got e-correspondence in Mil Connect, and then the tricare.mil. You can sign up for email as well. Those are great websites, especially the changes. It'll list all the changes that are happening and when they're happening, how they're happening. So you don't need a slideshow to go over this stuff. It'll have it right there on the website. So tricare.mil, those are the folks that develop policy and make changes in the TRICARE program. So it's coming from the horse's mouth, if you will. So, and I think that's all I have. Thanks so much.